Going from the early version of the Arcanist that I was able to preview to the version that hit the PTS, there were a few changes to some of their skills, both the balancing and the way that they function. I already put out my Arcanist preview video and I had a ton of fun putting that one together. Thank you to all of you that watched that already. But because of those changes, some of my initial impressions from that video have also changed. So I did want to cover those changes here in this video so that you are all up to date as well and not going off of older info. So for the DPS ultimate, Unblinking Eye, you might remember that I said I felt like both of those morphs were a little underpowered. Well, they have been adjusted to add in a bit more oomph. So both of these appear to hit in a 5-meter radius now instead of a 3-meter radius, making them a bit more reliable for AoE damage. I think the tooltips are still a little bugged here as the top part says 5 meters, but the text below says 3 meters. It does look like 5 meters is the correct one though. And then the Tide King's Gaze morph got a bit longer duration added to it, so now it's 8 seconds instead of 6 seconds, so you'll get 4 more ticks out of this one now. And then this is the morph that also follows the target around, and they changed it to redirect if the initial target died. And then for the other morph, Languid Eye, this one is still 6 seconds and it targets a specific point on the ground, but it got a ramping tick increase at 7% additional damage per tick. So since this thing ticks every half second, that's 12 ticks total, and your final tick should deal 77% increased damage. So this thing should hit like a truck now. I have a feeling this is going to be the go-to ultimate for a lot of scenarios now for the Arcanist. I can see the Languid Eye morph being preferred for more stationary fights, or at least if you have enemies holding still long enough where you can get all of your ticks off. And then maybe for bosses that move around a ton, you could use the Tide King's Gaze morph, since that one would follow them around. But just keep in mind, we are still on week 1 of the PTS, so I'm sure a lot could change in the coming weeks. Next one up is Fulminating Rune. This is the skill where you put a rune on the target and everything in the area gets a damage over time on them. And then with this morph, after a 6-second period, there's a secondary explosion as well. I had complained about the weird synergy on this skill that buffed up your secondary hit, mostly because this morph removed the original synergy from the base morph, the one for your teammates to deal damage. So it looks like they scrapped that and they put the original synergy back onto this morph as well. And they even buffed it up a little, as this Fulminating Rune morph will allow 3 allies to hit the synergy instead of just 1. So that's pretty nice now. I like the adjustment here. With the 2 morphs, you have a clear separation. You have one that does a nice AoE pull-in and the other that's a bit higher on the damage for both you and for your allies. All right, next up is the Abyssal Impact skill. So both morphs of this get that Abyssal Ink debuff, which is the 5% damage done bonus that lasts for 20 seconds on the target. Well, on the early version, I saw the Tentacular Dread morph got an additional 5% extra to that damage done bonus per crux consumed, so 15% total there, and that stacks with the base 5%, so it was 20% additional damage done to the target for 20 seconds when you cast this with full crux. So that is why I was really emphasizing how much stronger this morph was than the Cephaliarch's Flail morph. However, they have adjusted this now on the PTS to only be 2% additional damage done per crux consumed, so now that's just the 6% stacked with the base 5%, and you get a total of 11% damage done instead of the 20% that it was before. I just didn't want people seeing these new PTS numbers and linking those to my initial reaction. So I definitely think this brings these 2 morphs much more in line with each other now, since the Stamina morph gets the nice bit of execute damage. And then this one will give you an extra 6% total damage done. So I was glad to see that this was adjusted to help bring these morphs a bit more in line with each other. And then about the Cephaliarch Flail morph, I must have just been mistaken about the execute damage. It does in fact work just like Whirling Blades in that it scales up from the enemy's health, dropping from 50% to 0. Sorry about that. That is my bad on the initial report. I thought it was immediately 100% additional damage as soon as the enemy hit 50% health. It's still pretty nice, but it's not quite as unique on that end as I had initially proposed. All right, next up in the defense line, we have Runic Jolt and its morphs. So this is the taunt ability. There is an extra bonus on there that was not present before, 2% reduced damage taken per active crux. This didn't seem to replace anything. This was just added onto the skill as an additional bonus. So 6% total reduced damage taken while you are at the max of 3 crux if you have this ability slotted. Next up is Runespite Ward. This is the health scaling shield in the same skill line. So this no longer increases the damage shield size per crux spent. It looks like they scrapped that idea, but instead they put a health scaling heal per crux spent. So you have a base heal on this that scales with your max health. Looks like 10% of your health per crux. I did just have the base 16k health here for this tooltip. But the more crux that you have when you cast this, the higher that heal will scale up. I think this is a good change to this. Probably the Arcanist didn't really have a nice spammable self-heal for the tank. That heal they have on Runic Defense is pretty nice, but it is not something that you can spam. So nice to see another useful tool added in for Arcanist tanking. And then on that Runic Defense skill, it now applies the minor resolve to you as well, not just your allies. On the version I saw, it was separated out. You only got minor protection, and then your allies got minor resolve. So now the allies part is still the same, but you get both of the buffs. So pretty nice little change to this skill here, and it's nice to see that they revisited a few of those defensive abilities. I saw Nephis point this out, and I agree as well. I do think that the heal here should be automatic when you go below 50% health and not require you to take damage while you are below 50% health. Would make it a bit more reliable if that was the case. And then finally for the healing line, that special new dynamic cost that is present on the Rune Blades and Fate Carver DPS abilities. Well, the original version I saw, it was only on those two skills, but it looks like they've also added it to the first three skills in the healing line. So now you have 2 heals and shields that could also cost stamina if that's your higher stat. I thought this was pretty interesting and could open up the door to some pretty unique stamina healing types of playstyles that aren't very commonly seen. And those are the only changes I noticed to the Arcanist kit from the version that I initially saw. So the vast majority of my initial coverage and feedback over the skills, it's still the same, but I did want to give you guys an update on the changes here. As far as the class as a whole, I'm still gathering feedback, and it is still rather early in the PTS. People have only had a few days with it now, but there are a couple of things here that have stood out to me. I saw Nephis posting this one as well. I think this was posted in his ESO Discord. The status effect passive does come across as a bit weak. It's only 15% here, and especially so considering you don't have any poison, flame, or bleed abilities in the Arcanist kit to proc the top 3 damaging status effects. Honestly, I could see them bumping this up to 50% and it wouldn't be overpowered. Outside of burning, poisoned, and hemorrhaging, the other status effects don't really hit very hard anyways. And if you take a look at something like the DK's passive, they get 50% to 2 of those top 3 hitting ones, and they get resources back from them as well as a part of that passive. So I don't think 50% to all of them as the only thing that the passive does would actually be anything too crazy, especially since they don't have as easy of a time to proc them as some other classes might. Could also see this going as something like a mix of status effect chance and status effect damage put into the same passive. I think that could be interesting as well, but right now this one just seems a bit lacking. And then the class overall, based on what we've seen, seems like it is a smidge behind the pack. The 20% damage done bonus that was on Tentacular Dread, that was really carrying the class's damage on the early version I saw. And so with that gone, I didn't really see anything major put back into the class on the damage side of things other than them buffing up their ultimate to bring the total package back up again. I do think it was a good change to bring the 2 Abyssal Impact morphs better in line with each other, but maybe some of those class passives could be adjusted to compensate overall. Faded Fortune is another one that felt a bit awkward to me. If you aren't constantly spending and dumping crux, then this passive can actually just fall off. I was messing around with a no beam build where you just sit at 3 crux, and even though I'm casting skills that build crux, they don't actually trigger this passive once you are at the full 3. So I think that may have changed actually from the early version I saw. I thought I remembered this being able to be kept up just by using crux abilities even if you were full already. So maybe a change here to this passive to allow for a little more flexibility. I think that would probably be nice. And then the class as a whole, it feels very dependent on engaging in the class builders and spenders, and without those you really tank your DPS. I feel like more so than with most other classes, there isn't as much play like you want wiggle room in it. I can't really see using non-class spammables and doing some of the other things that some classes can get away with at a minimal loss. Definitely gives it a strong class identity to start with, but it does worry me that it will be a bit too one-dimensional over the longer period. But I'll definitely be digging into this a lot more in the coming days and weeks and make sure that I keep you all up to date along the way. And in the meantime, thank you Kortekk for allowing me to share this combat metrics report with everyone. This is the highest one I've seen so far on the Arcanist, and I thought many of you would like to see what some other players are working on and the setups that they're using. He had another very comparable Parse using Deadly Strike and Whirl of the Depths together instead of the Coral, Riptide, and Pillar of Nirn shown here. It does look like Reliquin is off the table with the Arcanist due to the long channel on the beam and any other set that would require constant light attack weaving. And the Mythic, actually the new one that lowers your light attack damage, actually works pretty well even on the dummy with the Arcanist and the beam, because you're already missing so many light attacks anyway. Losing your light attack damage completely is not as big of a hit as it would be on some other classes. But yeah, hopefully this gives you a good starting point if you are testing on this PTS and trying to come up with a good setup. But that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for stopping by. I want to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters and YouTube members. The contributions help a ton to keep the website and YouTube channel going. And a special thanks to Nicholas, Simon, Cougars Bay and the Cougar City Guild, the Order of War Guild, Cantankerous Cat, Shady, Iffy, Blake1816, Mordecai 1212, Santanico, Vidridi, Florian, Phoenix, Nalandia, Unemployed, Chryseliana, Cha-Cha, and Technical KO. Thanks again, and I'll see you later. Bye.